What are you doing right now? You spend 45 minutes of you setting up the camera and moving things around over here, Dr. Maxfield. What is going on?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how to work real cameras. So someone can teach me how to make a camera focus on you, because I don't know how to do it without touching it. And
isn't that their autofocus feature over here?
Maybe. Let's call somebody.
Yeah, you're out of focus now.
No. Wait a minute. You serious? I thought he was trolling.
What do you look like, Luke? Do you look in focus to you?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, if you look in focus to you, then you're fine because it's recording locally. Your internet's bad, but that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Cool. I'm not worried about it. Let's rock and roll. All right. Everyone, welcome back to Doctorly Unhinged, where we give our unsolicited and unhinged opinions. I'm Dr. Shaw.
I'm Dr. Maxfield.
And we have a special guest. Introduce yourself.
I'm Dr. Bishir Aldaba.
Board-certified dermatologist and Mohs surgeon, also happens to be my business partner at the practice. I don't say partner at the practice because it creates a lot of confusion on social media. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So today we have a lot to discuss here, and we're going to do a little bit of a warm-up, get the juices flowing. That's a weird intro for what we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
That's a weird intro for what we're about to talk about. So starting off, would you put it on your face? I'm going to yell out a bunch of phrases, and then you're going to tell me, both of you, whether or not you would put it on your face. You ready?
I want to hear Bishir's first. I want to hear his.
All right.
All right. First up, honey.
Yes.
Yeah. Heck yeah.
Heck yeah. Okay. Yeah. One of the best ingredients. Sticky, but effective. Turmeric.
Yes.
Yeah, do it. Does it do anything? But I would do it.
I think it does.
It does. Ginger.
I'd go with yes.
I'd go with no. I don't know. I just don't.
I'm with Dr. Maxfield. I'd go with no also. Yeah. It could probably be pretty irritating to the skin. All right. So the next couple ones that I'm going to shout out, it's going to sound like I'm being vulgar. I am just talking about things that people are doing on social media. So these are things that people are doing. They have done, they talk about them. And so this is why we're talking about this. So first up, menstrual blood.
That would be a no.
I am also on a no. We've talked about this before. Somehow this is a controversial take.
Yeah, somehow this is a controversial take.
Yeah, any blood that's, I don't know, any blood. I don't know. And then we have PRP, and it's like, how is it different? This is why it's controversial.
Yeah, but PRP is not blood. It's a component of blood.
Yeah, it's everything but the blood.
That's true. Really, but if you take whole blood, right? Say you take whole blood. Now we're talking theoretically. Let's say you take whole blood and you don't spin it down and pull off the platelet-rich plasma from it. Won't that whole blood still have growth factors in it that could then potentially be beneficial for the skin?
It could, but then you have everything else.
Yeah, and then you have everything else. But is that bad for you to put blood on your skin then?
Or is it just wasted product, so to speak?
Well, you're wasting it anyway when you're doing PRP.
I don't know. I think we now have now we're at odds with each other. No, my issue sort of with menstrual blood, which is crazy that I even have to have this discussion, is that it passes through the canal and in that process is exposed to, different bacteria in that area, which can be obviously a spread of infection. And so, pure blood, I think, is a little different conversation. PRP, obviously a different conversation, but then menstrual blood to me just doesn't seem to have any benefits and just more risk.
What if it was your own menstrual blood? Is the question.
Still passes
same thing though.
Canal, right?
But it's your bacteria.
Yeah, but it's your candida
but the
too.
Flora in your anogenital region is different than the flora on your face, presumably, right? So that's like saying that I'm gonna, not like they're the same thing, but say that you were to smear feces on your face, I think would probably, it is your own feces.
You know what's sterile though? You know what's sterile is
urine.
Urine, exactly. So this is the urea take. Okay, so would you put urine on your face?
Would you put urine on your face?
Yeah.
Would I? No, I wouldn't. Why would I do that?
It's sterile.
That's the $1 million question. So
It's like
no, I wouldn't.
urea,
What about breast milk?
electrolytes? Okay,
Breast milk? Yes. Because it contains, doesn't it contain acids like alpha hydroxy acids?
Galactose
When it's
is not an acid. But
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure it functions as much of a thing because it also has like your maternal antibodies. It definitely has a lot of natural healing. Not natural. I would hate that word. It has a lot of properties that can be beneficial, I think. So you could sell me on the idea that it could be helpful. You could probably move me. Now, would you do it? There's the whole breast milk shortage thing. Like, could you be doing something better with it? But then again, it's your breast milk. So I'm going to sit in the middle. Would I? Maybe. I probably won't in real life, though. Actually, I know I won't in real life.
All right, last up, snail mucin.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
That was hesitant. That was real. I'm not sure you meant that. I don't think you. I'm going to bring you. I
don't like the consistency of mucin.
I think he said yes to everything so far. So
no, I said no to menstrual blood.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay,
and I wouldn't do urine either.
I'm a hard yes on snail mucin. I love that. I think it's really nice. Like if in the summer, I think it's a great moisturizer. And you can mix it, like you can dilute it. But I have some 99% snail mucin here. I will make sure to bring that to you next time I see you.
No, there's actually quite a bit of debate. Obviously, snail mucin can't be vegan. And then there's always questions about whether or not the snails are being tortured in the process of producing this mucin. Apparently, a lot of the bigger brands like CosRx do it in a humane way. I've never been to the lab, so I can't confirm that necessarily. But from my personal experience with snail mucin, I do think it actually has a benefit to the skin. And of course, it has a lot of humectants in it and a lot of amino acids that can be beneficial to the skin if you were to break down the composition of the mucin. But I'm just talking about my own personal experience with the products. I actually find them to be quite beneficial, though they can contain allergens because they contain snail proteins in them.
Dust mites. Isn't that the cross reactivity with snail mucin? Dust mites, cockroaches. I think it's that. There's a cross reactivity that's unique to snail mucin. And so it's one of those two. Sorry, we're off the cuff here. So
sounds like board fodder.
Yeah, it does sound like board.
Yeah,
that's where I live, though, is these random little nidbits.
Little factoids. All right, so now that we've warmed up, let's jump into the meat of this discussion today. Today, we're going to talk about dupes. Dupes have been going viral on social media. They seem to come in peaks and waves, right? So you have this whole push of dupe culture, very popular, every like 1 or 2 years, it just pops up and is very popular. What is a dupe? So dupe is short for duplicate. It's supposed to be a product that's very similar or exactly the same as another product that you're using that might be more expensive. So the impetus for dupes is basically that a product is too expensive. And so a company comes along, makes a less expensive alternative that's supposed to be the same. And then everyone is supposed to go out and buy that one instead. So Dr. Maxwell, what do you think about dupes in general?
So, I don't think I believe in them. And there are a couple of reasons why. And we're kind of
like you don't believe they don't believe they exist,
yeah.
Or
like a true dupe. A true dupe is
okay.
Uncommon, and it kind of comes back to the discussion. I think we started the year with this. It's the idea that formulation matters. And I know some, like we talked about Good Molecules and how they put the percentages of their ingredients, but we've also seen products brought out by someone like L'Oreal Paris where the formulation seems to supersede every individual ingredient's benefit. And then, so I think if you look at a product like SkinCeuticals and then you look at another vitamin C, like I think it's Skin Diva has a very inexpensive vitamin C with the similar ingredients on the package. I still, even though the same ingredients are on the label, I don't believe that it's an identical product. Now, could you call it a dupe? You would certainly throw that into that category. But I really don't truly believe you're going to get the exact same results from these two products.
Okay. Dr. Aldaba.
Even if you think the active ingredients are the same and the formulation is equivalent or very similar?
Yes. I don't think it's quite the same.
No, I sit on the opposite side. I think a lot of skincare is overpriced. And I do think that if you have the right formulation and the active ingredient with the vehicle, I think the vehicle really matters. So if you have a dupe, I do think that the vehicle has to be of similar efficacy. But I do believe in dupes.
There's the keyword though. That this first word was same. The later word was similar, and I'll buy the similar
for the
but I don't.
vehicle.
Oh well, I'll buy the similar for the active in the whole product, but I won't. I don't think of the same. But I do believe in similar. So like you take like a SkinCeuticals vitamin C, what is it, like $120, and then you pull out this laundry list
180.
Oh, ouch! I died a little, and then you bring out this laundry list of I think really high quality vitamin C products in the $30 to $40 range. So I think is it worth that money? Maybe not, but I would go similar results.
So the question to you though, how much better is it? So are you talking about something being at 85 and something else being at like 90? You know what I mean? Or if you're,
we don't know. Yeah, I think that there's a degree of when you're creating when formulation matters, and the more that we talk to chemists and the more that we dive into the research that goes on at some of these bigger labs, the more interesting this story becomes, is that there is a degree of this ingredient with that ingredient stabilized at this temperature with this clinical study increases the penetrance of this ingredient and makes it last longer over time. Like there's so much that goes into this beyond just like baking a cake essentially and throwing in a bunch of different ingredients. And the more I learn about skincare, the more I think formulation does matter. It's interesting because if you go back to just dupe culture in general, what it does to brands, it seems that if you're duping upward, that it's okay. If you're duping downward, it seems to be like very unethical, and people get really outrageously.
Wait, what's a
they
downward
get really
dupe?
outraged by this.
Yeah, explain
So
that.
What I mean by that is that, like, say for example, a L'Oreal dupes an indie brand.
Okay.
Right? That feels wrong, right? Because you're
Right.
like, they're stealing their intellectual property.
Right.
This is like the basis of their brand. These companies have billions of dollars. Why are they stealing from a small indie brand? And then when a small indie brand dupes a larger brand, that seems to be almost heroic in many different ways. And so I think that's sort of interesting. And I think that, intellectual property theft is sort of at the core of this, right? Because you take somebody like SkinCeuticals vitamin C, where they pioneered it at Duke, and actually Dr. Aldaba was at Duke, and so maybe he can speak a little bit to this, but they formulated at the right pH. They did all the studies on penetration. They did all the studies on vitamin E and ferulic acid, stabilizing the formula and making it more effective. Then you have a company like Drunk Elephant that comes along and they dupe it in their vitamin C product. And then they actually get sued by L'Oreal because L'Oreal held the patent for it to be formulated at that pH with those ingredients. And Drunk Elephant lost the lawsuit, in fact, but they continue to sell the product. And I'm sure that there's some type of licensing agreement between the patent holder and the actual, product distributor like Drunk Elephant is now. But what does that mean for like the culture at large when somebody puts their heart and soul into a product and then another company comes on, is able to sell it at a cheaper price and steal your intellectual property? I don't know if that would feel great if you were the one that created that formula.
I mean, I agree with you there as far as intellectual property, but also that's why we have patents and that's why those are in place. But once the patent is expired, then don't you think that the general population or the world population should benefit from it, right? Because then it goes to gatekeeping. So are we allowed to do that? How long are we allowed to do that? But I also think that it depends on what your skincare goals are, right? So is the most expensive the best for you, or can you have a cheaper alternative or quote dupe?
Yeah, so that's the secondary question: is do I think it's worth it to buy this more expensive vitamin C? And the answer most of the time is going to be no for me. And anyone who follows me knows I'm always recommending drugstore products, affordable products, recommending vitamin C's in the cheaper price range. Not necessarily saying like buy this other one, it's a dupe of the SkinCeuticals vitamin C, but buy this vitamin C, which is less expensive because it's effective, and not really necessarily comparing the two. I think it's a conversation worth having because it's happened the opposite way, right? You have a brand like Charlotte Tilbury, who does makeup, and they actually ended up suing Aldi for stealing basically their design on a makeup product and winning against Aldi because the form was the same, the box was the same, the product was supposed to be the same, and then everyone was calling it a dupe, which kind of reminds me of the fact that Dr. Maxfield and I made a video about Supergoop's Unseen sunscreen and the Trader Joe's sunscreen being dupes of each other. And those products are very similar. Yeah. I'm not going to lie. And I will say that the Supergoop Unseen sunscreen is prohibitively expensive for a lot of people because of the size of the product and the price of the product, though I still like the Supergoop sunscreen. So at times I feel bad about the dupe situation. But then to Dr. Aldabuz's point, I also feel bad for the consumer because once somebody makes a great product and they make it prohibitively expensive for people to buy it and other people could benefit from it, then someone coming in at a lower price range increases competition. I think the biggest issue we see this in is in the pharmaceutical industry, where people hold these patents and then they make really small changes to the formulas once the patents expire so they can continue selling a biologic drug for $100,000 in the United States, whereas overseas it's much cheaper. And so there's parts of it that feel scammy on both sides. And I think that dupe culture can be very harmful for small indie brands and can be harmful for even bigger brands too. So I don't know. I don't know where I fall on this one.
So can we take this a step further? How about if you're talking about pharmaceuticals, like you just said, so drugs, generic versus brand name. Somebody could argue the same thing, saying that the brand name has a better vehicle. Now, I've heard of some people, there's an Adderall shortage out there. And some of my friends say that when they're getting the generic alternative, it doesn't work as well as the brand name Adderall. And same thing for thyroid replacement and all of that, thyroid hormone replacement. Sometimes the generic doesn't work as well. But I think those are the exceptions and not the rules, because I know you, Dr. Shah, you prescribe generics all the time.
Yeah, so I certainly prescribe generics, but what's actually interesting about generics versus regular, the original drug that came out, is that the original drug actually undergoes much more testing than the generic drugs do. So, we did find out that there are other percentages, the vehicles that these things are put in, and sometimes even the actual active drug being an enantiomer or a similar drug, but it could be chimeric. The way that the molecule rotates across the axis can be different, which can completely change the function of the medication. So when a new drug comes to market, they have to go through a very rigorous process with the FDA. They have to file a new drug application, and that costs millions of dollars, and they have to prove tons of testing of safety. And then when a drug comes on and makes a generic form, they follow something called an abbreviated new drug application, which is much shorter. And all they have to do is prove that it's similar or close to the same as the other medication. And so it's much less testing, it's much less expensive, which allows them to sell the products for much cheaper, but they never truly go through the same rigors of testing that the original does. And so I do think maybe it's marginal, maybe it's not. I do think that there is a difference between generics and the original. Even if you look at the ingredient list or the INCI list, they can be the same. They may not be exactly the same.
Well, here's the big problem too, though. And I think this is more a problem in the over-the-counter space. But, we give SkinCeuticals a lot of credit for pioneering an ingredient. We often see in the Journal of Cutaneous and Aesthetic Dermatology and the JDD, Journal of Drugs and Dermatology, a lot of brands publish their studies. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of cost that goes into this initial R&D. And a lot of companies do studies that don't get published. But if soon as and it may already be there, but if we continue to green light the idea of dupes and stealing a formula and even heck, you see a new product comes out, it's doing well. Sure. Let me turn around in my lab. I'll get the same product out for $10 next month. And but I think if we do that, we're kind of discourage that initial upfront inertia of innovation and also of testing and efficacy on some of these products. Because if someone knows that their product formula is going to get stolen right away, why bother test it? Or why bother put into a legitimate test? Make some random small clinical study where it's a survey. Does your skin look better? Why, yes, it does. Bam, clinical study. It's good study. Right. These are good results. Go get your thing.
Because to your point, they don't have to do these studies, right? Especially skincare brands that are over the counter. Now, when you talk about the pharmaceutical space, that's totally different. But when you talk about your products that are available at your drugstores, none of these companies, like the L'Oreals, don't have to do these studies, right? They they just don't have to. It's not required. The government doesn't require them. All they have to do is stability testing for 3 months, and that's it. So the fact that they do this additional testing, is it discouraged if there's no upside and the formulas can be easily duped? That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know.
So let's talk about our favorite dupes.
Okay.
So then if we're not going to talk about our favorite dupes, then let's talk about products that...
No, what's your good dupe?
No, my similars, there's no similars. Do you, like for vitamin C's, do you need to get the SkinCeuticals vitamin C, or would you recommend one at a lower price range? Now, I'm not saying that the other ones are the same, but can they have similar benefit, to Dr. Aldaba's point, by being less effective?
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing is, here's my rule of thumb to my patients. If it works for you, if it's non-irritating, then I would get the cheaper option, the less expensive option, I would say. And less expensive doesn't mean it doesn't work as well. Sometimes less expensive works better than the more expensive one, or the more expensive one has some ingredient that can be an allergen. So unless you can see or you can prove a difference between using that one, if you use the less expensive alternative, it doesn't work as well, then you can try the more expensive one. That's kind of my approach.
That's fair. My approach is, if it hurts your wallet, if you're like actually budgeting to get your vitamin C serum, that's not the one for you. Like if you don't think twice to spend $200 on your vitamin C serum, then God bless. Yeah, like spend a little more to maybe have a little more peace of mind that it's working for you.
How about sunscreens, Dr. Shaw and Dr. Maxfield?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I think the same can be said about sunscreen. The interesting thing about sunscreens is that they have to go through independent testing in order to get approved. So because sunscreen is regulated as an OTC drug in the United States, they do have to prove at least that the SPF level matches. And to me, the only thing that matters with sunscreen is that you're going to wear it every day. One, so that means you have to like the product. And two, that you're getting the SPF level of at least 30, right? So as long as you meet those requirements in my book, you're fine, right? So since all of the products that come out over the counter for sunscreens have to go through that testing, theoretically, they should all reach that number. Now, we know that that's not true, because there's been tons of exposés on different sunscreens that did not meet the recommended SPF 30 or 50 or whatever was on the bottle. But we kind of have to trust and believe that the testing was done correctly, even though we know at times it's not done correctly. So to me, like sunscreens, it doesn't have to be an expensive product, as long as it says that it's SPF 30 and you like wearing it.
Yeah, that's where I would spend more money on my sunscreen, especially for my face, to get the Allergen sunscreen. That's a little more expensive.
Me too.
Yeah, now that's the question. Dr. Maxfield and I have talked about this before, we tend to find that the sunscreens that we like, and I think we might have talked about this in the last episode, is that the sunscreens that we like tend to be in that higher price range. The Alta MDs, the Isdens of the world, they tend to be a little bit more expensive. They tend to be a little bit more elegant, and we tend to use them more personally. But it hurts me to know that you're supposed to wear 2 finger lengths of sunscreen every day, and you have 2 ounces of sunscreen that's $40, $50 for people. That is like the difference between eating and wearing sunscreen. So if you can find a sunscreen in the $10 range that you like, I would definitely recommend that over something that's going to break the bank. But if you have like unlimited income, right, that's a different question, right? Is like the cost sensitivity. And I think all of us are very in tune with cost sensitivity, because we still see patients actively, and we're practicing dermatologists. So we have patients that come in that are very wealthy, that no number you throw out at them and they're going to say no to. And then you have people that can't even pay the $10 to pick up the drug from the drugstore, right? So because of that, like I'm always in tune with like, oh, like I know this hurts to spend $10 on a sunscreen even. And on the other side, I know that there are people that, and if you're the person who can spend whatever they want on things, then get the more elegant sunscreen, buy the Isden, buy the Alta MD, get the SkinCeuticals vitamin C, buy the Skin Better Science Alpha Ret, like get the top of the top. But for most people, you'll still see the benefits at the lower price ranges.
All right. What's one dupe product each? One biosimilar. What's one biosimilar product that you think is perhaps worth checking out? I'll start, because so you guys have a second to like think on this. You may not have one because it's actually, I find that the more you think about it, it's actually pretty hard to like be like, oh yeah, this ingredient actually checks out.
I think I have one though.
Okay, what you got?
Neutrogena Hydro Boost Water Gel.
Okay.
A dupe for the Tatcha, the water cream.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay. I have to compare those side by side and see if they're textural. So
I
would say alternative, right? Like something that's going to have a similar benefit, similar texture, similar feel, but be less expensive. So then I would say SkinCeuticals 242 lipid and Skin Fix triple lipid peptide. I think that those products are similar in efficacy to me in my personal experience, but I would actually prefer the Skin Fix one because it doesn't have the essential oils that 242 SkinCeuticals has.
It's a good one.
Hot take.
Super hot. So hot.
What do you got?
All right. So I'm between two.
Got,
I'll go with the one I think that everyone's got. Oh, that one's so good though too. The one that I think people are looking for is like the SkinCeuticals one. So that one is, the vitamin C, E ferulic. Dermatology, which is a brand I talk about a lot, DRMTLGY, just no vowels. They're against vowels. They have a vitamin C, E ferulic with peptides. Anything dermatology puts together really is also cosmetically elegant. It's not a cheap brand, but comparatively.
So what's the price difference between the two?
It's cut in half. It's like $70 for the dermatology one, $180 for SkinCeuticals. So it's still not it's still like your upper middle class of vitamin C's in terms of price point, but it checks the boxes and their stuff is very cosmetically elegant. So that's pretty close. Also the Elf Holy Hydration.
That's the same thing. As
the Elf Holy Hydration.
Fix, the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, you love the Elf.
Yeah, Elf Holy Hydration face cream.
Did you say Elf?
Yeah, they have this peptide face cream. I'm obsessed with it. I've had it on my shelf for years, and I just got obsessed with it this year. But
you've talked about it like 6 times already.
I know it's like guess this year, but it's a dupe for the dermatology.
Product. You're influencing me. Can you de-influence me now?
Yeah.
Go ahead, de-influence.
It comes in a fragrance and a non-fragrance free version. So the fragrance version.
Oh, it does. I'll get the fragrance free one.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. All right. So next topic. So I think we've all come to the conclusion on dupes here. Dupes, they're tough. They really are tough, and they're very controversial. And I think that if you're promoting dupes, you have to think about what the ramifications are for the people that are receiving your content. For example, this is in the counterfeit space, so it's not necessarily the same, but there was a bunch of influencers on TikTok and Instagram that got sued by Amazon for promoting dupes. They called them dupes, but they were really counterfeit products. And so there's legal ramifications for counterfeit, for promoting counterfeit goods is illegal, by the way, just so in case anyone knows. Okay, so next topic, medical tourism. This is massively popular right now on social media. What we're hearing now, and this has been going on for years and years and years. I mean, maybe even decades, where people travel to other countries to get medical procedures, usually cosmetic procedures, done in those countries. Now, this was something that only few people had known about or talked amongst their friends. They went over to Mexico or they went over to Turkey. They got a procedure done. They told maybe their small group of friends. But now, because of social media, this is amplified. So people are going and getting hair transplants in Turkey and then coming back on social media and talking about their experiences with these hair transplants. And so now medical tourism is booming overseas. Turkey is a major destination country for medical tourism. What do we think about medical tourism in general? And would you personally get a procedure done in another country?
That's a good question. So medical tourism, just to look at the scope of it, it's $60 to $80 billion a year worldwide. In medical, that's the money spent on medical tourism. So Mexico, Turkey, India, South America, a lot of these places. I personally would do it if the country is, number one, safe, and if they had accredited hospitals. Like, for example, Turkey has accredited hospitals by the government, and medical tourism is backed by the government in Turkey. So I would do that, and I would have to know somebody who's done that same procedure at that facility and seen their results. Like, I would personally have to know them. I wouldn't just trust their website or something like that.
I'm with you. The latter.
So you go first, Dr. Shah. If you went,
that's like, who's the sacrificial lamb?
So Dr. Shah, if you went and got a procedure, I was like, wow, that looks good, and I'll go get mine.
We see so many
Right.
Kodachromes though. Like remember, in dermatology training, a Kodachrome is like a picture, and you have to know what happened, the whole story behind it, just from the picture. But there were so many Kodachromes about mostly like silicone injections, and a lot of those were from Mexico or Central America, or other injections, or cosmetic surgeries that went wrong. But usually it's the injections because you get very specific reactions to those. So I think I have a little bit of a negative bias just because of the medical exposure from these untoward reactions from medical tourism. Would I do it? I probably wouldn't, unless, like you said, I knew somebody who did it. It's the whole trust thing, which is so funny because I think even as professionals, we buy into anecdotes so hard. Like our friend is like, "Hey, it worked for me." We're like, "Oh yeah, it does. That's great. Forget the study.
It
It worked
really
for
is
you."
interesting. You know, I think it's sort of interesting. I've been doing a lot of traveling lately, and the interesting thing about it is that you start to realize that the world is such an interesting place in the sense that like what we thought of other countries potentially growing up is not necessarily true, right? Like you go to Dubai and you're like, this place is amazing. Like it genuinely is like an amazing place, right? Like just over the top nice, right? You go to some place like Turkey, right? Super nice place, right? Obviously they have places that are not so nice, but like overwhelmingly, this is a very successful, country that has grown a very, very, very robust medical industry. They have, I think, 660,000 people come to Turkey for medical tourism. And there's like an international organization that accredits the hospitals that get these treatments done. So I think if we step away from the Western view of the medical system, because we don't really necessarily have the best outcomes in the United States in general, and how we quantify these things and the way that the medical accounting is done in this country versus other countries is difficult to tell, but our medical outcomes in this country are not necessarily that great either. And so like I don't necessarily hold the idea that it would be better to get it done here versus over there. And I think it depends honestly on, I don't want to pass judgment on other countries, but it really depends on the country that you're going to, right? Like if the country is pretty advanced and they really put a lot of money, time, and effort into this industry, then I think that it's probably safe to go there and get these things done. Now, I think there's a couple pitfalls. One, Dr. Maxfield is saying about infections. There are increases in infections, especially specifically in certain parts of the world where you can get these mycobacterial infections that are common with any type of medical procedure. So some of the more rare mycobacterial infections occur with implants and with plastic surgery that's done in other countries. So certainly there's a risk of infection. The other downside, I think, of medical tourism is the follow-up piece of things, right?
True.
So say that you get your hair transplant in Turkey, you stay there for a week, you go back, and then there's some type of complication. And if you've been practicing long enough, you know that no matter how good you are at what you do, there is always a risk of complication, no matter how well you perform that procedure. It's what you do afterwards that becomes really important, right? So if you are an injector of filler in the United States, and you've never had a vascular occlusion, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best injector of all time. It probably just means you haven't injected enough people, because some of the best injectors that I've ever met have had vascular occlusions because people have variant anatomy. You can't predict it. The key is, what do you do once that complication happens? Do you have the hyaluronidase on hand to dissolve the filler? Do you have an ophthalmologist on call that you can send them to, right? So it's not only like doing the procedure, but it's what happens after the procedure. And I think one of the concerns with medical tourism is the lack of follow-up that occurs when you get that procedure done. That being said, I would say that Turkey, the results that I've seen from people I know personally, and people that I've seen on social media that I trust, is actually pretty incredible. And I'm not going to lie, I would get a hair transplant in Turkey. And the reason why I say that is because they do more than they do over here. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, do you want to go to the guy in the United States that does one hair transplant a month? Or do you want to go to the guy that literally has people flying all over the world and all he does is hair transplants at a internationally accredited facility on a 5-star and staying in a 5-star hotel with business class travel to Turkey for a few days? I mean, I wouldn't be against it. And, I think it depends on the country, but I'm kind of pro medical tourism in the right settings.
Dr. Maxfield, are you convinced?
No, I'm not convinced. I
You
would
just
do
don't
it
like
too,
to
maybe,
travel.
but
That's why.
I also don't like to travel. Yeah, dude, I'll stay home.
That could be a big
You go
reason.
to
See, you're
Hawaii.
biased. See, you have a bias. But Dr. Ferrer, my dermatologist partner down in Florida, said just this week alone, she'd seen 2 or 3 women from South America who had botched plastic surgery, and they're crying. They've had bad breast implants. They've had scarring from tummy tucks, abdominoplasties. So she's kind of like Dr. Maxfield. She's like, oh my God. Because I was talking to her. I'm like, yeah, what do you think of this medical tourism thing? And she was like, no, I've seen too many bad cases. But I think this is a selection bias because you're going to only see the bad results, right? So in the United States,
100%.
you're going to see like burns from med spas, right? You're going to see vascular occlusions. You're going to see these complications. So out of the, say, like, I'm throwing a number out there, let's say 100,000 people had a procedure in South America, they come back, and we as professionals are seeing maybe the 1,000 that had the complication. All of a sudden we're biased. Oh my God, don't go down there. But I know plenty of my patients who go down to Mexico for dental work, and it's incredibly cheap. It's across the border sometimes. You just cross the border, and the physician is licensed and accredited in the United States, but they're just doing it in Mexico. So I think we just have to, like Dr. Shaw said, step away from our bias and just be objective with this.
Nah, show me the numbers. There's no numbers.
Yeah,
here.
I don't think there are good numbers because I tried to look into it, like whether the rates of infection or the rates of complication were higher. I think there's no good statistics on it. So I think it's really just like our own anecdotal experience with this. But I really do think that, and the reason why I started off by saying I've been traveling a lot lately is because my worldview has changed significantly as the result of travel. And how advanced other countries have gotten over the past, I think, 20 years is just incredible. And so I would not discount what people are doing in other countries because I truly think that some of the greatest innovation is happening in countries outside of the United States lately. Not saying that the United States is not coming out with great innovations too, but I think some of the stuff that they do in Turkey, they're not doing here as far as cosmetic procedures. I've seen some of the devices that they've rolled out, and I've seen some of the techniques in which they do hair transplant. They're just very, very, very advanced over there. So it is interesting. And you have to also think about a lot of the cosmetic developments in skincare actually come out of South Korea because there's a lot of innovation there in the skincare space. And then we take some of that innovation and we use it over here. That being said, our medical system is very slow to adopt to changes, and FDA approval takes a very long time. And so by the time we have things, they tend to be on the safer side. That's why you see things like botched plastic surgery or silicone or things that come out new over there that end up, we find out, are not great for you. And so the United States tends to avoid those really detrimental things. But some of the things that are more tried and true, I wouldn't just go to Turkey because it's cheaper.
Right.
It is cheaper to get the procedure done there. I would go there because I would think that they would do a better job in some things. That's actually my thought. It's actually not to save money, because I think if you just go to the lowest priced place in South America or anywhere else in the world, that is a bad way to do any type of cosmetic procedure in my mind. But I'm just saying, don't discount like what people are doing in other countries, because I actually think some of the innovation over there is incredible. But my concern is the follow-up. And so, getting things done in the US, especially if you're going to be traveling on a plane the next day, not smart to get something done overseas if you have no follow-up.
Yeah, and that's where I fall too. It's mostly the accountability thing. Like, who's accountable at the end of the day? Again, it's not. I'm actually with you. I don't think the U.S. healthcare system is the most effective, and I don't think we have the latest and greatest, because the FDA is that international short step. Like, it's so funny because so much innovation comes out overseas. The Americans are the last to adopt. Even in the over-the-counter space, we talk to brands behind the scenes. They're like, it's going to take like 3 years to get this ingredient into the U.S., but it's like available in Europe. And then at the same time, Europe is quick to ban too. So it seems like some of these regulatory bodies are like, oh yeah, let's give it a try.
True.
Oh, no, one study came out that is bad. Out of here. But we're just slow on our end.
That's super interesting that you mentioned that. There's something called Profilo that's very popular. I was talking to a dermatologist in the UK. It's a type of filler. I think it's super low G prime, basically made to be injected into the dermis to basically improve skin quality. I could be completely wrong about this. This is what I remember from one conversation, so I have to dive deeper on this. Not very popular in the United States, but in overseas, apparently it's massively huge, right? So apparently this will eventually trickle in the United States, I'm thinking. But but Profilo huge in other countries. And so it's interesting when it comes to cosmetic procedures, when we get things before other people, and sometimes people get things before we do. But that's why I think that everything has become a global economy in a lot of ways, right? And I'm going to the World Congress of Dermatology this year, which is in Singapore. I'm also going to the European Academy of Dermatology meeting in Berlin. And I actually think that we need to be sourcing more knowledge from the international derm community, because I think there's a lot of cool things happening in other countries as well.
Yeah, with you.
So to sum up this medical tourism thing, and I think this is pretty controversial, we have Dr. Maxfield, who is against medical tourism. We have Dr. Aldaba, who is for medical tourism. And then me, I'm kind of in between, but I'm leaning a little bit towards medical tourism just because of the advancements that have been happening all over the world. You have to do your research, because otherwise you can end up in a really bad situation. And a lot of these damages can be irreversible. So don't just go to the cheapest place. Definitely do your research. Make sure that these institutions are accredited. There's tons of before and after pictures. There's testimonials. There's people you can talk to, because you do not want to be messing with your body and make a major mistake. So that's our summary on medical tourism. Now let's talk about the effects of Ramadan on the skin. This is something that's personally very interesting to me, because they've actually done some medical studies on the benefits of Ramadan on the skin. The original intermittent fasters. So first, what is Ramadan, by the way, Dr. Aldaba?
So Ramadan is a tenet of the Islamic faith. It is one of the 5 pillars, and we fast during the month of Ramadan, which is 29 or 30 days from dawn until sunset, which means no drinking, no eating, and not participating in any sexual activities. But then at sunset, then we can eat, we can drink, and we can be as we normally would be until the next day.
It's an interesting be as we normally would be.
Yeah. But, because you're not.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so basically the idea is like, how does this affect your skin? And it's super interesting, because this is the idea of intermittent fasting. And we talked about this on a previous episode, but intermittent fasting, not eating from a certain period to another period, what does that do to the body, and how does that affect the skin? They've actually studied what happens to people's skin during Ramadan, but also what happens internally during Ramadan. So during this fasting period, the levels of inflammation in the body, the cytokines in the body that cause inflammation, actually decrease. This has been studied and proven that the levels of inflammation in the body decrease. What does that mean for the skin? A lot of skin diseases are inflammatory. Acne, psoriasis, hidradenitis suppurativa. So by decreasing those levels of inflammation in the body, it should improve your skin overall. Now, does that translate actually to real clinical studies? There are clinical studies that show that psoriasis and hidradenitis suppurativa are improved during Ramadan by people who are partaking in fasting. This is fascinating to me.
Now, I think this is interesting, because you love your ancient wisdom, and I'm actually on board with the whole ancient wisdom thing. I think, like, if you get me one-on-one, I think there's so much to talk about with this. But interestingly, too, we do know, and not to take away anything from like the spiritual aspect here, but we do know that with both of those conditions, weight is actually a variable that can make both of those worse. So like with psoriasis, it's like a chicken or the egg, and same with HS, which came first. And of course, it's not just a weight problem. There's a strong genetic component with both, but we do know that weight can perpetuate both, at least in part. And so I'm all for controlling your diet, I should say. I'm like, is intermittent fasting the answer for everything? I don't think so, but I do think it could be helpful. But also,
that's a good question that you're. It's interesting that it's chalked up to weight. Because weight is tightly tied to insulin resistance, right? And so because insulin resistance plays a big role in inflammation in the body as well, and weight gain, and also all these other contributing factors, insulin levels decrease during the fasting period as well. And so I think that like you said, it's a chicken and the egg thing. Like, yeah, maybe you lose weight, which most people don't lose weight during Ramadan. At least I don't. But most people don't lose weight during Ramadan. But I think that overall, like better, healthier practices are important. There are, the other question is like, what are you breaking your fast with? Because I eat a lot of fried food when I break my fast. I eat a lot of sugary food when I break my fast. So I don't have necessarily the best diet when I break my fast. I don't know about you, Dr. Aldaba, but when I'm eating, I'm like not necessarily eating the best types of food. So I don't know necessarily that I'm offsetting that inflammation in any way, but I think if you were to eat healthy food, it could be beneficial for you.
No, I agree. I agree. It decreases your insulin. It decreases your well, it increases your insulin sensitivity. It decreases your insulin resistance, which definitely helps decreasing also sebum production. So some might argue, well, if you're dehydrated or if your sebum production is decreased, aren't you more dry, or is your skin more dry while you're fasting? So yes, you do have to hydrate, and you would do everything that you would normally do. You can moisturize your skin, you can do all of that. But I think we're mixing things, Dr. Maxfield. Weight and fasting are two different things, right? So yes, I agree with you that obesity will have a negative influence on being a psoriatic arthritis, psoriasis, all these other conditions. However, even if you are obese, if you fast, you can still improve this, right? So I do think that they're two different subjects. Fasting and obesity are separate, and I think you're kind of mixing them there.
No, I think it could be a confounding variable, which would be the appropriate term. Now, I don't know the study in particular. I don't know if they stratified, like did a substratification or a Hawk analysis to take out weight loss, see
Ooh.
if that was a debate. But I do agree that there are values, and we talked about this on the other one. There are values to intermittent fasting that go beyond the weight loss. I'm a firm believer of that. That's why I've done it for like a year and a half without losing any weight, because I definitely wholeheartedly believe that it can decrease the inflammatory profile, have benefits to go well beyond weight loss for the whole body. I just wonder if it's a confounding variable. So post hoc analysis, what's going on in that data? I don't know.
A nice post hoc analysis by Dr.
Nice.
Maxfield. Okay, I think that that's a fair thing. I just think it's fascinating,
It
because
is.
I'm a big believer in ancient wisdom. I truly believe we don't know anything, and it's sort of interesting that we think like at this point, like I don't know, like I feel like we graduate from med school and we think that like everything we're gonna know about science has already been solved, right?
Mhm.
We've solved it
Yeah.
all and we learned it and now we're ready to go. But I think there's so much. I mean, even of what we've learned in the last 100 years, like think about where we're going to be 100 years from now. I mean, half the things that we believe we're probably not going to believe anymore. But to me, I always find this like I don't know, it's this weird like sense of like something bigger than me when like an ancient tradition is somehow validated by Western medicine. To me, like it just feels like this, like my two worlds colliding, and I love that so much. So anytime that happens, I get really excited about it. But anyway, let's talk about.
Pork. I'm going to throw out pork right there. I couldn't agree more. Pork, like think about this. Pork, whether it's the Judeo-Christian, Islamic tradition, all of it together, pork is this product with closed feet that's taboo. And it took 2,000 years or so, maybe like 1,500, who knows, millennia until someone figured out, oh, hey, there are a lot of specific worms to pork. So I'm with you. I think the validation of these millennia old ideas is incredible because, yeah, maybe it's 2,000 years until we look at something else and we're like, oh, maybe that was why.
Yeah, we're so easy to discount it is the problem now, because now we have this like hard science-based evidence, right? Your ad hoc analysis, your statistics and all that, right? So you have that, but the problem is we don't have the resources to test everything. So then if we can't test it, or if we can't see it, if we can't feel it, therefore it's not true, is our approach, which I think is a wrong approach. I think the approach should be like cautiously optimistic with all these things, right?
Right. And I think we talked about this before. Like, as long as it's not in lieu of a life sustaining treatment, right? You're not saying, well, my ancient wisdom tells me aloe vera is a chemotherapy agent and I'm not going to do chemotherapy because I believe in this aloe vera plant. Like, I think there's a point where it gets dangerous, but I'm also like cautiously optimistic on some of the more natural and traditional wisdoms out there, as Dr. Maxfield knows. So let's talk about something that's always really interesting to me, Allergen of the Year. So the American Contact Dermatitis Society every year puts out an allergen, which I think is actually like a pretty cool thing. We should put out a something of the year too. We should put out like ingredient of the year or skincare hero of the year or something like that.
Can we do that in March?
We should come out with something of the year, the doctorly something of the year. We got to ideate on this, but allergen of the year, this happens every year. And 2023 allergen of the year, lanolin. Let's talk about it.
So lanolin actually comes from sheep's wool. right? It's like a wax-like substance, and it's used as a moisturizer, as an emollient. But, right, Dr. Shaw?
Yeah,
You're
no,
looking
it's
at me. You're looking kind of interested there.
no, it is.
You just
I'm more
de-influenced me.
interested in what Dr. Maxfield is doing right
Yeah.
now. Like he's like texting people. He's on Tinder. Like not really sure like what's going
No,
on.
the benefit
on
of having the additional person
he's
talking.
fidgeting.
Yeah, well, now my microphone fell off again. But
You need a fidget spinner.
Yeah. No. So anyway, it can be an allergen, but it's also a very good like moisturizer.
So it's functional.
It's functional, but it's the allergen of the year because it can cause itching, redness, inflammation for some people. It's composed of like fatty acids, alcohols, and esters, and it can create a good occlusive barrier on the skin.
Let me quote Dr. Klingman here.
Ooh, Klingman, an Albert Klingman
Albert
quote.
Klingman.
All right.
So this is older, and I think this is an interesting take because wasn't it? I don't know his last name, Matt, Dr. Matt, who had this huge thing on lanolin. Wasn't that his
Hughes? Matt Hughes,
Dr. Hughes. Wasn't that it with Cetaphil?
Yeah. No. He was fragrance. It was like linalool.
Oh, it was linalool.
Yeah,
okay, forget it. Then back to Klingman. So quote. It's interesting. The quote, in fact, lanolin is at most a weak contact allergen. The supposed hazards of sensitization, are a resultant of a faulty science and failure to appreciate the limits of patch testing. Lanolin allergen is a myth created by overzealous professional patch testers. No one has succeeded in sensitizing animals or humans to wool, wax, alcohols. Most of the case reports are false positives in association with the angry back syndrome. He's a controversial person.
Wow.
This is actually an incredible quote. So for those of you who don't know, Albert Klingman invented tretinoin. He also invented Triluma, which was initially called Klingman's formula. So this guy is a pioneer, and we could talk. We have to dedicate an entire episode to Albert Klingman and the studies that he did at UPenn, plus the human rights violations that occurred at the prisons that he tested his products. Definitely a future episode. That being said, a fascinating quote from Albert Klingman. So the question is this again true? Have we forgotten the ancient wisdom of Albert Klingman here? Is it in fact true that this is just truly not a real allergen? Because we use Aquaphor quite a bit in dermatology, and Aquaphor has lanolin. Now, lanolin has known benefits because it is a very good emollient and moisturizer. So there are known benefits of lanolin. There are known risks of lanolin, apparently. Again, it reemerges as this contact allergen. Now, is it a true allergy or not? I don't know. That we're going to have to dive deeper on this.
Yeah. Do you think like this allergen thing of the year that they have to pick an allergen, right? Then you start running out of allergens because you can't like recycle them.
So you think the allergen of the year is a scam?
I think so.
Okay.
No,
last year's allergen.
I don't think it's a scam per se, but I think you're going to run out of allergens. Like true allergens. So you're going to like pick these weak ones potentially, right?
I see what you're saying. I mean, I don't actually know of any patients that have ever had an allergy to Aquaphor personally.
Same here.
Though that being said, apparently, I mean, this Contact Dermatitis Society, I mean, these guys love patch testing, guys and gals. So, I would lean to their expertise on this. And, I believe that they're probably getting true allergens too. I mean, this goes back to the question, can you be allergic to pure petrolatum or pure Vaseline? And a lot of derms think you cannot be. And I kind of lean towards that side, though there are a few or one or two published cases of people being allergic. And is it a contaminant, in fact, in the petrolatum isolation process that's causing this, or is it truly an allergy to pure white petrolatum? I don't know. And I don't know if we'll know that about lanolin here either. Last year's allergen of the year was aluminum chloride, which is an antiperspirant. And interestingly enough, I actually get quite a few patients with contact dermatitis in their armpits. And I always thought that it was due to fragrance in their deodorants, something else they were putting underneath their arms. Maybe it was a form of intertrigo. But after seeing that it was a contact dermatitis allergen of the year, it made me think more about aluminum being potentially the cause of these contact dermatitis reactions that were happening in the armpits, something I had not thought about before. So I think that this contact dermatitis allergen of the year just alerts me clinically to things that could potentially be causing problems in my patients. But that being said, I'm not sure this Kligman thing. I'm gonna have to lean in deeper on Maxfield.
Yeah, but the aluminum chloride that you were seeing, was that an allergic or an irritant contact dermatitis, you think?
Well, that's a
your
good
patients?
question. I mean, I think that it's hard to tell the difference between the two, right? Clinically, but itchy, red, irritated. I lean a little bit more towards allergic contact dermatitis. Could easily be irritant. I mean, the American Contact Dermatitis Society had this as an allergen of the year, so true allergy, I suppose.
What's funny, Dr. Bisher? I actually wholehearted believe in this list.
What list?
The allergen of the year. I'm just looking at the last, some of the notable previous allergens.
Well, 2014 contact dermatitis allergen of the year, methylchloroisothiazolinone.
Yeah, they're notorious.
Notorious.
Formaldehyde.
No, I'm not saying
fragrance.
it's a scam. Like
You said it was a scam.
No, I said the whole allergen thing
Pat,
of the year.
you got to edit this back where he
Yeah.
says it and he doesn't say it. It's going to be hilarious.
Oh my god! But listen.
Nickel.
I think you're going to run out of allergens. Are they recycling allergens?
No.
Oh, that's a good question.
Corticosteroids,
I haven't seen it.
So I see more corticosteroid allergies than lanolin. I've never seen a lanolin allergy, but I see corticosteroid allergies more often. Rarely, but I see them. So I do think that lanolin is probably less of an allergen or a weak allergen. So I do agree with the ancient wisdom there. But
the question
I haven't
is, does
seen
it
the
change
numbers.
your behavior? Because this is actually an interesting question for me, is because corticosteroids, which are supposed to actually treat allergic contact dermatitis, can cause allergic contact dermatitis. Does that stop you from prescribing corticosteroids? Probably not.
No.
So the question is, because lanolin is a known emollient, which does have benefits to the skin, which are actually hard to reproduce from other wax esters and things out there, does it stop you from using lanolin? Or do you just tell people who have highly sensitive skin, like atopic dermatitis, or somebody who's actively having an allergic reaction, to avoid lanolin? Or has this become a general recommendation for everybody that you treat to not use lanolin?
I just use the Dupe Vaseline.
Yeah, we do,
I
right?
don't use Aquaphor.
But even before this was
I use the
Contact
Dupe.
of the Year.
I don't buy Aquaphor because of actually I don't do it because of the lanolin, to be honest. Because at Duke we had a great patch test. We had great patch testing. We had professors who would teach us about allergic contact dermatitis, and we had experts in the field. So I became hyper acute and hyper aware of this lanolin thing. So the reason why I don't use Aquaphor is because of that. And also my business partner, Dr. Ferrer, another dermatologist, uses Aquaphor. And then I was looking at our invoices, and I'm like, wow, Aquaphor costs way more than petrolatum. So I'm like, we're definitely not using Aquaphor because it does the same thing. So I'm going to use the Dupe. And in this case, the Dupe works.
Okay. That's amazing. So it's more of a financial motivation on your end.
Both. But
No,
yeah,
fair enough. Someone's got to maintain the bottom line here. I'm out here just whatever, I'm leaving water bottles all over the office apparently, and not.
He's not
disposing. I'm not recycling enough for him, and
no.
I do recycle. I just want everyone to know, for the record. So, and I drive an electric vehicle also. Nobody correct me on this podcast right now. So, anyway, Dr. Maxfield, any thoughts on that?
No, I'm with you. I think the thing is just drive awareness, like you said. So I also just don't use Aquaphor. Before this was the allergen of the year, because as a dermatologist, it's a known allergen. Like, it's in our textbooks. Like, even though I brought up the Klingman thing, maybe it's controversy, but it's in our textbooks as a potential allergen. And so for me, I'd already kind of switched. I don't use Aquaphor. Rarely, if ever, do I recommend Aquaphor, because I love petrolatum. And I think it's also interesting you've widely adopted the petrolatum enunciation.
Yeah, I think that's the correct enunciation. And like I've always said, ever since we started creating content, whenever I'm proven wrong, I have to adapt to that being wrong piece of it. And I think that it is petrolatum from the research I've done. So I've adapted the way that I speak, because I think that we all need to be human enough to realize
my
that
gosh.
we could be wrong.
Okay.
So anyway, this is an interesting discussion. We covered a lot of things today. So we covered dupes, we covered medical tourism, we covered the effects of Ramadan on the skin, and we covered the allergen of the year, which is lanolin. Thank you, Dr. Aldebuff, for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Tell people where they can find you.
Well, you can find me at Fora Dermatology. And
He just hangs out at our office all day. So if you're
hang
looking
out.
for him, he's there.
Right. You can find me at Dr. Bisher on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube.
Amazing. Well, thank you all so much. Please subscribe wherever you are. Leave a review if you enjoyed this podcast. That would really help us out. Any final words, Dr. Maxwell?
No, as always, we appreciate you being on this journey. Thank you, Dr. Bisher, Aldebuff, for stopping by. It's always fun. Appreciate it.